Ben Elias, City of Tucson.
Jana?
Jana Potvin, Pima County DOT.
Heidi?
Tana Morana.
Jonathan?
Pima County DOT.
Mark?
Good morning, Mark Hoffman, ADOT Multimodal Planning.
Patricia?
Good morning, Patricia Pablo with Dawn Autumn Nation.
Patrick?
Patrick Hartley, City of Tucson.
Paul?
Hi, everybody. Paul Casertano, Pima County DOT.
Brett?
Good morning, Rhett Crown and Shield, City, Tucson Transit Services.
Well, for joining us. Is there anybody else online? Oh, there's Dan Grossman. Let's see.
Yes.
Well, we have a quorum and good representation from all of our jurisdictions. So thank you all for coming and participating today in kind form. So regional planning efforts are enhanced by reporting time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and materials. At the conclusion of the meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. All right, so on to agenda item number 3. So we have 2 main agenda items today. One will be our RMAP performance measures. Dave Mitchell will walk us through some of that. For those of you that participated at our TPC meeting, I believe it was in October, Dave started this presentation, and we'll just dive into some of those items with a little more detail. And then after that, we will dive into the project list and work through that. So we've allocated 2 hours for this meeting, and hopefully we can get things accomplished. By no means do we anticipate having all the decisions made for either performance measures or the project list, but we do want to get these discussions moving and some questions answered. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Jeanette. Yes, Crystal, if you could bring up that the slideshow presentation. This is the same one that we had at the October TPC meeting. So I'm just going to bring it up for review of what we had gone over. I won't go into the specifics, but we have seen this before. For those of you who haven't, you can request a copy directly from me, or it's online with the packets for that date. So where we had left off is we're basically at the point where we need to figure out how to establish the targets for the RMAP performance measures. We've got 38 performance measures that have targets associated with them that were identified for the original RMAP. So these were developed back in 2015, 2016 during the original RMAP development process. And then they were a performance report was given when we did the 2045 update a few years back. And so we are at the crossroads now. Where do we place these targets as the horizon year 2055, which is beyond the 2045 date that we had for original targets. So our recommendation was to kind of use the same desired change that was identified and apply that to current trend data. So we would be using present day 2022, 2023 data sets to establish a new baseline and apply that change to basically come up with some draft targets for you, and then we can review them case by case and see if they make sense. There are some air quality measures that we want to kind of change the verbiage on the measures themselves, and also to align with other goals that have been established by other regional air quality initiatives. So we can just dive into those. This is a review of our system maintenance performance measures. There's 3 of those that have a target. Currently, we're on pace to meet all of them. The performance measure, the performance target itself is that column there. You see 2045 targets. So we didn't have numerical values for our targets. We have a rate of change. So this is the recommendation that we're looking to apply to the current year baseline values to then establish a 2055 target. On note, the highlighted one, that measure had changed since we did our last report for the 2045 RMAP update. The city of Tucson and SunTran had purchased a lot of new buses with alternatives. Here's how the charts look. That's reflective of the data sets. The triangle that you see there, that is the benchmark. So that's where we wanted to be in order to be on pace to reach our 2045 target. That's what that stands for. So you can see that we're well below where we needed to be for pavement and poor condition to be on pace. It doesn't imply that we had met our target. It just implies that if we were continue as is, we would achieve it. That said, we all know in pavement that we've got a lot currently in fair condition that will start to degrade and transfer over into poor. So just because we're doing well now, 5 years after we set the targets, doesn't mean we will continue to maintain that pace. So that's where we need the advice of the experts on our member staffs to give us some insight on, should we continue to have that same desired rate of change, or should we accelerate, or are we okay with or maybe decelerate, depending on the type of target that we're talking about. I'll pause here. Does anybody have any questions on what I've shown so far, or what we're trying to review and get an understanding for? I'll pause there. Okay, if nothing, I'll go on. Looking at safety, we have 13 measures in that category. This is by narrative a high priority topic for the region. It often comes up in discussion at any of our committee meetings. Also is a subject in a lot of call to the audience and other public feedback, is that the concern for safety is a high priority. We can see that we are behind pace on more than half of them. The ones that are in yellow are ones that have changed direction from the last report. So we were on pace for two of them, and those are now behind pace. And conversely, we were also behind pace on two of them. Those have swapped into on pace. Regardless, it still continues to be an issue. We had set pretty significant targets to reduce the amount of fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. Those are expressed there by reductions of 25%, 33%, and so on for the 2045 measures. We recommend to apply those same rates of change to current baseline figures to help us help make our roads more safer and to get us in line with the goals originally adopted for RMAP. There'll be 3 pages of graphs for these ones, and I'll pause and just allow you to review them. And many of them understand we are trending in the wrong direction. You can find how the current status by reading the last line of the graph, the 2020 status. So for total fatalities, we see that we are trending away from where we want to be in 2045.
Hey, Dave, do you have updated data on any of this, or are you just pulling from the last plan? I mean, I think some of this is available up to 22 at this point.
Yes, the 2022 data is available on our crash safety explorer. We don't have that updated yet as an formal report, so that's why we haven't issued it in committee format yet. There was intent to have an updated one for the next tip, and that has been pushed back. I will offer up this committee. I do have the materials in preparation and draft status, and before the meeting, my objective was to try and have a standalone report to serve up in early spring, perhaps even by end of January. So thanks for that question, Patrick. And yes, I have given thought that we do have the data sets. It would be useful to have those with it, and that will be part of this development process. So there will be no no decision making before we have a chance to look at the most current data.
Great. And when you're talking about the tracking to trend data, then that is in reference to this 2020 data set that's not been updated to reflect the 2022 trends.
That's correct. You're 100% correct. So
Cool.
this, everything that's what you see here is based on the data that's also being visualized. We're not incorporating any 2021 or 2022 data sets. The trouble with having a comprehensive report with some of the data is that there's a data lag. There's a lot of observed data that we can collect from federal and other third-party sources, but then there's also a good chunk, almost half of our data sets are outputs from our transportation demand model. And so that poses a problem, is that we won't be able to fully evaluate all the measures, but the data sets that we do have, I will have updated information for you. And if there are any other limitations or constraints to that, those will also be communicated to you guys.
Dave, based on your preliminary look at the more recent numbers, I know it's off the cuff, but do you have a sense of, are they kind of similar, or do you see any drastic changes?
I would say, just from my observation, we're getting worse in crash and safety measures. That's particularly in the realm of vulnerable users and pedestrians. Bikes has eased up a little bit. There aren't as many fatality and serious incidents, but a lot of that can be contributed to the fact that we're also not commuting to work as much. The ACS community survey statistics has shown a significant drop in their estimates. We're talking 10,000 down to 7,000. So the data is showing that fewer people are riding, and that we're still getting the incidents. People are also driving more. So there's the shared risk is disproportionate for the vulnerable users. They're driving less, but taking on more risk. I mean, they're commuting less, but taking on more risk, because we're not seeing the same amounts of increases in automobile related, I would say, fatalities and serious injuries amongst motorists. Those areas are not suffering as much as those outside. That's what we're seeing in regional and national trends. ADOT is currently, I believe they've issued their the final draft, an improved version of their vulnerable users road safety assessment. It was a federal requirement, and they've just put that out for information. So I will begin diving into that and seeing how that could be used in this realm as well.
David, are these regional numbers or national? I mean, obviously, right, local, right?
These are local numbers. Yeah, these are on our roadway networks. There's discussion. Sometimes we come to you with FASTAC targets. Those are unrelated. Those are statewide numbers. The ones that we show you here, these are Pima County numbers, and these are for all public roadways. And it's the crash data that we get comes from law enforcement statistics. So there may be some bias built into that. So if you want to look into some of the details of the crash, we do have some characteristics, but we also have to understand this is coming from a local law enforcement source. And so we have a misrepresentation of bicycle crashes. There's no report. There's no crash that shows up in this report. So we could be seeing, I wouldn't say serious injuries. It's possible that some people get injured and it's never filed a police report, but some people just may be wary of getting involved or not knowing what resources are available. So that's a known issue, known challenge that doesn't show up in this data. But everything that points to is that there's a need to increase our safety efforts for vulnerable users. So that's a national trend. We can apply it locally here with our knowledge of our network, with the data that we have, and with resources and the experts and community feedback. But that's a process that we'll have to look into. We can help steer that process by having meaningful targets. And so that's where we'll have to use our abilities to make sure that we are putting the right targets, and then perhaps using the information for that for the target progress, or progressing towards those targets, to use in either project selection or even looking to make some decisions between two different projects. If one of them can move the safety, that's how we can maybe affect some of these changes. You had asked about what are we seeing in local trends. I can also say that bridge conditions, we're continually moving favorable in that direction. Bridges have a long lifespan. We have a low number of bridges that are in poor condition, and we've had major roadway projects such as our freeway interchanges that have moved the needle in the favorable direction. It's because the performance measure in that realm is based on deck area. So the larger the bridge, the more influence it has on the region. We're doing very well in that performance category, and we should continue to do well. Pavement, I've been monitoring. We've been slowly getting more good pavement, but also our fair pavement is starting to extend. So what that's saying is that the efforts that we're making for pavement improvements are showing up in the good category, but a lot of the good ones are dropping into the fair and almost at a pace that's not keeping up with showing into the good. So we're going to see that. We're going to see pavement conditions start to decrease unless our efforts are continued. Now, that said, we don't have the data for the Oracle Road project, which is a huge mileage and has 3 and sometimes 4 lanes along it. That will have a major influence on our pavement condition. Broadway Road project, the data is also lagging there, but that will also show favorable. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game. The data doesn't always give you the best picture, but we know if we know it's out there, we can kind of adjust the numbers if we want to, for our baseline evaluation. So that's where we'll need your input and insight as we move through this target setting process before deciding to carry on and establish the same trends. I won't go any further into the other trends, but you can see that it could be case by case for all of the issues. I will say congestion is pretty much the same. We don't experience a lot of recurring congestion other than during rush hour. And those are pretty much held at intersections and in those types of locations. Of course, we've got freeway delay right now with the Orange Grove interchange project, but for the most part, traffic moves through there and it's not causing severe delays. So our congestion figures are still on par. We don't see any threat to have those trending in the opposite direction. We are not seeing the desired rate change in transit ridership. That's continued since the transit strike almost a decade ago. So that continues to hold, and it was putting even more threat during the COVID shutdown. But I'll end there with current stuff and go back into our safety slides to wrap up. Here are the bicycle measures. You see here, we're trending away from target on 3 of those. That's the takeaway on these. We're not where we want to be on pace with our 2045 targets. Here's where we are with transit. These are all of the modes for transit. So you've got your Sunlink, your SunTran, and the Sun Shuttle programs are factored into this. But the number of incidents are declining. Next category is system performance. This is basically your congestion and the ability for capacity. We're on pace for 2 of them, but behind pace on a couple of those, and the ones that we're trying to reduce. In the original RMAP, the mindset was to get people to use more other modes of transportation besides personal vehicles, and we're not seeing that trend. And that's what's showing up in these 2 measures that are being increased. Here they are on the graph. I'll keep going, but if there are questions, please feel free to chime in. Next category is multimodal choices. So this is the shift from automobile usage into your other modes of transit, bicycle, walking, not only for commutes to work, but also for all trips, like running errands for utility, kids to school, all that. So that's where all these performance measures are trying to reach. And the idea is, again, to increase the population that uses these modes and to support the commutes for them by assisting in making them shorter travel times. So that's why you see some travel speeds to increase it and to have transit time reduced. we are behind pace on 4 of the 7 measures here, because again, our region is continuing to choose the automobile as the mode of transportation. And the graphs for those. For what that vertical line is in the total transit trips, disregard that. Looks like a cursor, I guess, from a screenshot. Again, takeaway for that is we're behind pace on 3 of the 4. Kind of get an idea of the ones that we are on pace for. We're well ahead of where we wanted to be on those ones, so they're not even a concern. I should take that away. The total miles of pedestrian facilities. We have not had a good sidewalk data collection since the original RMAP. That's something we've been trying to accomplish. Once there's belief that we are adding more sidewalks than required, and well above where we need to be on pace. We just don't have the data to support that yet. That is one of the, I believe, one of our work program initiatives is to acquire that in the next year or 2. Moving on to the next category, this is environmental stewardship, also known as our air quality measures. These are all air quality related from vehicle emissions. We have all of them highlighted to have the verbiage of the 25-55 target. We had assigned thresholds originally, but at the time there wasn't a full understanding of the data or the required trends, and there also wasn't all of the different initiatives in legislature to have either different or significant types of impact. So we thought the best approach would be just to have a year-over-year reduction in current rates. That's how FAST Act measures are tracked for CMAQ funded project areas. And it would be an easy way to approach that in order to not have to revisit it every time, or to have conflicting targets with other agencies or goals. I'll pause here. Dustin, do you have any comment on that? There was one that we had in conflict with the regionally adopted goal. Is that correct?
Yeah, specifically it was the PM10 emission. Air quality non-attainment area. Not make air quality worse up there. So generally when projects get introduced, they have to be offset. And, you know, maintaining current levels wasn't consistent with the requirements. So thing it is what they're requiring. This lines up with that. The other ones were some pretty drastic reductions on carbon monoxide and NOx and VOCs. Not totally sure the basis of those. It may have been that the newer vehicle emission controls are so much cleaner. You know, it's easy to attain those as the overall fleet became newer. I'm not sure that those will hold up. Becomes more modern, and those emission controls kind of even out. So reducing current levels is a good target. Other than the PM10, our other concern is ozone. So you've got the NOx and VOC emissions.
Thank you, Dustin. Does anybody have any questions on the air quality ones?
Can you elaborate on that PM10 emissions versus the PM2.5 emissions? What's the difference? What is it?
Yeah, the PM10, that's the particle size fractions, 10 microns or less in that diameter. So PM 2.5 generally comes from combustion emissions. So that's a finer particle, like generally a smaller particle size fraction. But we don't have issues with PM 2. And the larger one. PM 2.5 is part of PM10. It's just further subcategory that's monitored.
All right, thank you, Dustin. Moving on to the next categories, land use and transportation. The goal of this was to have our population near the mobility network. This is how we would monitor the performance of that. And to measure that, we were looking at access to jobs, access to homes, and well, not access to homes, or populations. That's where they reside. And then we also look at access to those through the modes of automobile and transit. And we're behind pace on all of these. This one's very related to the initiative to get people to drive less and take alternative modes. It's reflective here. It is also reflective of the expansion of our region. The willingness for people to want to drive has also made them willing to live further from where they have to work. It's also not convenient for them to, I just won't get into it, but basically that's the mindset of our region. We still would like to see that change, desired change in pace. But we would still recommend to retain the current thresholds. Rather than just a target, this is something that just has to be a shift in culture. But to track the performance of it, we would want to see a significant change in those, and we can still apply the same targets and still have the same level of analysis and achievement. But here we are in the graph mode, just looking at where we need to be with the triangles. You can see that we're pretty far behind where we want to be on pace. So if there was a desire to make up ground, the approach here would be to increase our threshold from where we currently stand. So if that was the desire of this group, to maybe, if we really want to push the issue, we would want to have more jobs available. So we would basically want to increase density, more development, more infill development and less expansion. Our roadway projects to reflect that would be fewer new roads, more capacity where there's density, that kind of thinking. So if that's something that our members are looking to do with their own project lists, this is where you would want how you achieve that. This performance measure is build the mobility needs where our populations and our jobs are, and these performance measures go. Or we will have a better chance at achieving our target. And I believe that was the last project area. So where we wrapped up in TPC was, there's the question of, well, how are we using this for project analysis? Is there opportunities to do more? And there's also some questions, are these the good targets? Do we need to revise some of them based on the knowledge that we have and not just carry over what we had done through the public involvement process back in 2015? Should we take away what some of the changes have been since then and incorporate them there, or should that effort be developed a little bit further? And I don't know. I'll leave it there. Jeanette, I'll hand it back to you.
So one of the things that we wanted to get out of this discussion is to go back to what Dave is showing. Just go back to one of your tables. It doesn't matter. Right here. So this is our recommendation, the 2055 target. That's what Dave is looking for feedback on. If you guys have any questions about that or perspectives to add to the conversation, or want to have any discussion on our recommendation, ideally what we would do is this group have that discussion and make a recommendation to go back to TPC. So with that, did anybody have any comments or questions or feedback on that approach?
So thank you, Dave. I appreciate you sharing this. I still tend to go back to the full table of all of the performance measure indicators and targets that's in the 2045 update and in the original 2045 plan. I think it's kind of valuable to see the full set of performance measures and how they align with the goal areas of the plan. So that's certainly something I think that should be given some consideration and maybe some explanation in terms of how these performance measures are aligning with the goals that are laid out in the plan originally. And, you know, it's obvious to me that it's not a perfect set of performance measures and never has been. And so I don't know that it's realistic to achieve all at the same time necessarily, but they are they're wayfinders for us regionally to figure out where are we falling behind with transportation performance. And I think that was the nature of the TPC discussion of, okay, if we're faced with this big challenge of cutting out a gigantic piece of the currently draft in plan projects and sticking it in reserve, what do the performance measures tell us are areas that probably should continue to see more focus, and what areas are on pace or doing just fine? So that, I think, was the nature of the TPC conversation, and at least my entry point into the use and value of the performance measures as some information to help make decisions on what kinds of projects might be more appropriate for a reserve list in the 2055 plan, as opposed to others where we're very behind pace on some of the targets that have been rolling forward. We may want to think twice before putting those types of things into reserve. So those are kind of originally some of my thoughts. I find it helpful to kind of look at that table so that I can see the baseline, the current, the benchmark, what the long range target is, what the trend is, and then the status. So you're doing some of that in each of these slides, but I think the comprehensive table is something that may be helpful for the jurisdictional members to reference.
Sure. Yeah. Do you have that one readily available, Dave?
Yeah, if you can give me a few moments, let me forward it to Crystal. She can pull it up.
Go ahead and pull that up.
This will be the one, you're talking about the one published in RMAP update, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll have it.
I think, that's the big picture for me, like to see all of the behind pace and trending aways, my eyes go there to look at, what's happening with this performance measure category.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. We're experimenting with different ways to skin the cat, if you will, so that we could present it in a way that kind of fits on our.
Yeah, it's hard to follow each one, and I know them pretty well. Like
one of the thoughts, that we had talked about, and I'm sure we've had this kind of discussion at TPC over one point in time, is continuing those targets and the value of that. We've only really done one RMAP update where we're reflecting, how are we performing towards those targets, and the value of going out in the next 2055 and then perhaps in the next one to sort of see that continuing trend. Like that would be valuable versus just changing our target every 4 years based on how we're performing or how we want to perform. But, rather than change the goalpost, really to track over the long term how we are performing.
Okay, we have a file, we're pulling it up right at the moment. I believe it's page 3, and if you could rotate the, which everyone can see clearly. Page 3, please. Yeah, that's the one. Can you rotate it so we can, might have to zoom in and have some of our page. This is the page you were talking about. Oh, are you able to see that?
Can you get on this one?
It's not up yet.
Got it on, we got on half the screens in the room and half not.
Here it's coming. Yep.
There we go. And Crystal, do I have control now? No, I'll let you pan. Yeah, so here's the table that was published in the 2045 RMAP update. It has all the performance measures that have targets with them, has the original baseline, had the current. So the current was when we did the plan, that would have been about 2018 data sets. Some of them were 2019, depending on the set. And then the 2020 benchmark that was the original checkpoint that we established from the 2015 baseline numbers. And then using our trend and then figure out where we needed to be at 2045, we were able to establish 2025 benchmarks. Those adjusted those adjusted our pace required in order to be on target. So if we were behind pace, the benchmark accommodated for that to bring it up, to basically increase the pace. And then the desired trend column was the status when we issued the report. So when the report that I mentioned earlier, my discussion with that I'm working on, this will be updated with the data sets that we have available. It'll be a table much like this. This is the one I hope to have by end of January. In fact, I might have it sooner if we decide to have a meeting earlier in the month. Cards fall. But yeah, this is the full data set of all the performance measures that we track that have targets. So that's a clarification we need to make sure everyone is on understanding too. Is we track a whole library of performance measures. So I can probably run off 60 of them that I track just for my uses. There are additional ones that are tracked different divisions, for example, or transit department has ones that I might not be tracking. But as far as the ones that are adopted in RMAP, those that are fast act measures, we have over 60 of those that are currently being tracked. And we can add to those anytime without having to be in the RMAP process. So what I'm illustrating there is that as a regional planning agency, that's one of our roles, is to provide as much of the data sets, and that's in our work program. So we continually to strive for that. Whether or not it's a measure with a target, we could still track the data sets for that. And by doing so, that sets us up for success for when we're ready to make a performance measure, we have the data sets for that. To paint the picture, and when we did the original RMAP back in 2014, 2015, we were relying on data sets that we had in hand. And so what we had were the library of our CMP CMP, that's our congestion management program. So we had performance measures that were outputs of our transportation demand model that were giving those performance measures. That was able to evolve through the development of the Fast Act program with additional data sets were being made available. We had a long-standing relationship with DADOT to have crashed it. But we're all of a sudden having federal requirements to track the data, but also being given the opportunity to have data sets. So that at that time, we were able to identify which measures we can start establishing targets for. And the reason for that is because we had 3 to 5 to 10 years or even more history, a backlog of data. Without the backlog of data, it's very difficult to establish targets because you don't know the trend. You don't know a short-term trend, you don't know a long-term trend, because there are anomalies in data, especially now coming out of COVID. It'll be very difficult to try and introduce new measures with new targets without having the big data picture behind it. So that's one of our increased efforts is for data collection this year to help with that effort. But important to note that we only have 38 that have targets. These are the ones that are on hand for having 2055 targets. Any other measure that we track probably wouldn't be on the table to have a target just from that limitation of not having the backlog of data sets. That said, if we do have a backlog of data sets, there's the opportunity to set a target. So Paul, now that we have this on screen, did you have any specific question, or did you want to offer up any insight that you have to our other members of how you're using this report, or maybe how we could use this for narrowing down our project list?
So I guess I would ask, in terms of public input and the establishment of updated goals for the RMAP, where you guys are with that. And I don't think it would be I don't see too much trouble with it, but I just want to make sure that we're kind of following a planning process that makes sense so that we can say, these are the goals for 2055 and kind of do that check to make sure that the performance measures are supporting the goals of, safety and security for all transportation users and whatever the general goals will be. Is there, how is your process working in terms of, are you still in the process of getting public input to kind of verify those goals, or are you just carrying them forward, or do you not really have to mess with them? Where are you with that? I just want to make sure that we're kind of not putting performance measures forward that might be, a little bit in conflict with the goals of the plan itself.
Thanks, Paul. That's a good question, and because that's normally the development process of a performance measures framework, is that first you have to establish your goals, objectives, then you can identify which strategies can help achieve those, and then you establish the performance measures to help track their performance. So yes, I believe the original intent was to carry forward the same goals.
Okay.
To change them would require an extensive public participation process, because they're not PAGs to change, or they're for the community to identify.
Okay.
And sorry to interrupt you, Dave, but
On this, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, Jeff, do you have anything else?
yeah, I mean, we anticipate our public outreach going forward for the next year, of course, closely tied to what's going on at RTA Next. I don't think that's a surprise to any of us at this table today. That being said, yeah, I mean, the intent isn't to like go in and overhaul all the goals.
Okay.
Unless we see a real strong reason to do so, basically coming out of that outreach effort. So if we see that, we have goals in a direction that are in conflict with what we're seeing with the public outreach, then yeah, we would, need to address those accordingly. But from the performance measure side, there's kind of two sides to the coin. One being, yes, what you've just said, like, are we tracking the performance measures to meet those goals? But also, are we tracking these things for the purpose of a continual way to monitor what's going on in our network and what's going on in our all these different areas. So there's value for both reasons, and that's why we don't want to just veer too far in one direction. That being said, as well, there's opportunities to add performance measures. So if there is a desire to do so or a need to do so, then that's something that we'll have to pursue as well. I do believe there is I'm looking at Dustin, there is a new requirement for one of the air quality.
It's
it explains better than I can.
greenhouse gas emissions performance measure. I have to set targets for reductions, so states need to set those by February 1st. And then MPOs have 180 days to follow.
Okay. So generally speaking, it's safe to assume that the performance measure categories are, for all intents and purposes, fairly stable. They're not really going to move around too much.
That's right.
Okay, so we may have to do greenhouse gas emissions as an additional environmental performance measure. I think we still need to figure out how to wrap our heads around environmental justice and Justice 40 and getting that kind of injected into this whole thing. So those are just some thoughts. I think there may be some hands up too.
Jonathan.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention the last thing that Paul just hit on was Justice 40. And I think with all the new federal requirements for Justice 40 and equity, we are probably going to want to include at least a measure or something on that, on equity within these performance measures. So that would be my suggestion moving forward.
Looks like Patrick, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious how these, I like the concept actually of maintaining kind of the targets near where they are as a means of giving us that kind of compass to the types of investments that we want to make in the RMAP and, you know, other local investments, other regional investments. So my question really is, how are these going to shape kind of the prioritization or the intention of this plan? If we're seeing that congestion, we're on target for most of those, but we're, you know, missing our track to target on safety and other categories, does that then indicate to us that that's where we were looking to shift funding in this program? And I guess the second part of that question is, do we evaluate the project list against these performance measures once we've made that determination through this planning process? I think there's like financial models you can look at for payment, for example. So you take the payment investment off the top and you say at this investment level, we're going to get to that 20% poor condition, or maybe lower if you draw a trend line up to 2055. Same with, say, transit ridership or access to transit or what have you. I mean, I think some of those things can be modeled out, and also probably the most direct would be the model outputs would be, are we going to evaluate the kind of congestion target against the model run? And if we hit that number, or if we don't hit that number, do we change the project list? Or, you know, how does this inform kind of that decision making?
That was a load of, yeah, I forgot your first question, Patrick. Would you mind repeating what that first one was? It
was all a big rambling question that got to some sort of point, but basically, how are we going to evaluate our project list against this performance measures? Because if we continue to do the same thing and make the same investments, we're going to continue to see the outcome, and we're going to continue to not hit these targets. The answer to improving kind of this mode shift isn't widening roads. So is that going to be reflected in the project selection of this plan?
Right. Yeah, you touched on a good point. And that is something that is a recommendation or best practice to continue to use performance measures to drive decision making. That's the essence of performance-based planning. We're still in our infancy in that, if you would. What we have set up at PAG is we for the project list, you can look at the performance metrics for a handful of categories. There's only a few measures that translate to that interface, and it has to do with it needing a spatial requirement, has to have data set that can be, you know, mapped out. For example, transit ridership, that those are a number of people, you can't really map that unless you look at it from a different angle, but then you're looking at a different measure. So you can't look at the ridership routes and that kind of thing. We're looking at total numbers. That said, sidewalk data is another one. We have a representation of it, but it's not the direct measure for what we're tracking for a target. For example, or to clarify that in the project report, it'll show you presence of sidewalks, whether it's poor or acceptable. So that's based on the percentage of coverage on that road segment. It tells you if there's a sidewalk or there isn't a sidewalk. So it's basically a binary thing. Performance report within the project list. Performance measure is related to number of miles and number of miles per capita. So those are tracked a little separately, and we don't have access to a lot of information in the project level for the scopes haven't been developed for a lot of them. Assumptions can be made. For example, if it was a project along Grand, Alvernon, Broadway, we could assume that there'll be sidewalks on both sides equal to the length of the project. But for other areas, maybe there's a sidewalk on one side or a shared youth pass on the other. That information may not be readily available to staffs and members here to put that into the project information. So we would have the way it's set up now is it's a little limited, but it's limited, but we are able to look at projects based on performance measures. and the thresholds that we have in there, and we can weight different categories. So if we wanted to look at something or look at our project list with an emphasis on moving forward projects that have current safety issues, so roadways that have experiencing fatalities and serious injuries, those would show up clearly in the project list if we weighted safety and crashes as a higher number. So we have some skill or tools available to us now as it's set up. Outside of that, we would go into the realm of what you were suggesting, Patrick, case by case, we evaluate, run models using our data sets, our tools, different layers of analysis to come to a conclusion of where the trend currently is and where it needs to be, and does that satisfy the goals also have about. So those are all possibilities. Those will all have to be developed. I hope does that answer your question, Patrick?
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think you touched on an important point too, is that kind of project specific prioritization, and maybe using this to reevaluate how those projects are prioritized through kind of the RMAP Explorer, in which we may be giving equal weight right now to safety and congestion. We're seeing that we have a safety issue, so maybe then that becomes more heavily weighted in that project prioritization of what goes on the in-plan versus the reserve list. I think that's a critical decision point and something that this can really inform.
Another thing you got to keep in mind is that this is a long-range plan. We're talking about 25 years. A lot of things can happen in 25 years. But Patrick was talking about, I think, it's more in the tip of the 5-year plan. Those are the projects actually moving into construction, where we have more specific detailed information. Now it's way out there. I won't even be here.
I think that's a great point, Jose. You know, originally we kind of, back in the old PAG days, designed these two to kind of coexist. So the long range plan performance measures would feed into at least some consideration of how to prioritize projects with the help of performance measures in alignment with the long range goals, right? So sure, making, unilateral decisions to throw things out in the long range plan may not be the way to do it, but I think Patrick has a good point. It could be a good point of reference for us to figure out if we're behind on certain areas. Let's prioritize those types of projects or projects we think address those areas as those stay in the plan, and the ones that where we're on pace already, those are looked at first for put them in reserve for now. Because we've got a big task of moving this boulder up the hill. I think Hannah said we've got to take $12 billion out of the in-plan list and stick it in reserve. And then I'm just kind of racking my brain with how do we select $12 billion of things that should not be a priority and should be kind of deferred to be in reserve. I think we need all the tools we can get to help us do that.
Well, I guess the big answer we're looking for is going back to Dave's presentation on, how we are proposing to track for the 2055 plan. It sounds like there's some agreement and support for that approach. I think the only approach that was really different from what we were already doing were on those environmental stewardship performance measures. But did anyone have anything specific to say to that point?
I guess not an environmental, but across the board. So those end at 2045, and is that the current ones? And is the intent to kind of keep those flat at that 2045 target, or is there going to be an evaluation of which of those trend lines would be extended kind of on that, whatever that curve is, to 2055? So if it's 20% poor condition for pavement in 2045, do we draw that trend line out to 15% in 2055, or do we say 20% is a good enough target and that's where makes sense from an investment perspective for our pavement system?
Yes, good question. We would use current year data, so we would be having 2022 and 23 data sets would be our baseline. We would apply that same desired trend, even if we were already on pace or well above pace. we wouldn't reduce or make adjustments to that threshold. It was just apply that same target. So a lot of them, if we were already on pace, we could mathematically end up more favorable than we would be in 2045. But that's kind of the intent anyways of the original goals, was to have long-term effect on our region. And what we achieve by 2045 shouldn't be washed out within 10 years. We should, if everything was set up and we did our job well, we would continue to see the impact well beyond 2045 and perhaps greater than what we even forecasted. So
I guess that's what I'm getting at. Do we want to go with a more aggressive target for 2055 if that trend line is the one that is desirable, or is that number that we hit in 2045 the desired target for that performance outcome? So do we want to go below 20% poor for pavement, which would keep that same trend line, or if we stop it at, and we just want to say our system at 20% poor pavement condition from 2045 to 2055 is the target we want to sit at, that kind of flattens that curve a little bit.
Yeah, I got what you mean. There are some that have specific thresholds, so that 20% is a calculation based on actual number. It's not reduced by or increased by, it's an actual value. I will say that pavement condition it changes from year to year. It doesn't degrade entirely fast, but because we have a very large surface area network, the data may show a change. So what I'm saying is there may be a lot of roadways that are only a few points away from falling from fair category to poor. Those will show up in the data. And so going from 2055 maintaining 2045 to maintain below 20%, does it make sense to also have that same value of having, what that's saying is less than a fifth of our roadways is in poor condition. That's how it would speak to the goal, how it would speak to the community's eyes is do we want to continue that, or should we be, like what you're suggesting, Patrick, should we reduce that to be 15%, 10% even? I can offer this up. The suggestions that we're making are to extend the targets to present in the draft document. Anytime along the process, they can be revised or added to, and after going through the public participation or feedback process, they're also subject to be evaluated and changed. So I can offer that up as maybe as a way to advance this item. If there's not a clear path to how we should change them, perhaps we could just kind of hold steady, and then as we develop through this, as we read through the project list, there may be some obvious decisions to change what we've presented, and I'm willing to help give us the resources needed to make sure we allow that process to happen. I'll throw that out.
Yeah, thanks. I got to hop off, so I don't mean to monopolize this, but I appreciate that. So I think a follow-up with my recommendation, or I'm supportive of kind of what was on the table of keeping what's broadly there. I think a follow-up discussion as to whether the trend line be continued to 2055 when we start to see those 2055 numbers, or if that becomes the threshold that this group or the TPC is comfortable with, would be a worthwhile carry on. Because something like safety performance, 2045 is a down payment on the way to kind of that towards zero death or vision zero approach. Whereas, again, pavement investment might be 20% is the right number, and then we reallocate those resources, keeping it at that target, and we're not trying to get to 0% of our network in poor pavement condition.
Just one final thought before Patrick walks out is, my thoughts go to the ADOT long range plan as well. They're kind of shifting their direction, recognizing that their pavement needs based on their pavement performance data are growing exponentially. So they're now saying, we're going to put a lot more funding and investment in that part of the long range plan, and that's what it's going to look like. So I think we need to give some of those thoughts to the performance measure categories that we have, knowing that some of them are just trending away. We need to somehow express the investment desired or needed to change those trends, I think, or at least discuss it.
If I will, Paul, our performance measures reporting tool in the project explorer does allow for us to weight multiple categories. So if we wanted to see, like, if we want to identify roads that not only hit the safety button, but also hit the pavement button, the ability to do so is there. And that may help us to do it, perhaps a first or second level round of cuts might, or not maybe a cuts, but evaluation of what gets cut, I should say, or what remains. Timing, yes, timing.
And I'm curious.
David, this is Jonathan with Pima County. Just a recommendation moving forward in the new report that, and maybe you were going to do this anyway, is just keep the 2015 data in the new report as well, because there's often a habit of getting rid of the old data and just showing the most recent data. But in this case, if we have 2015 data as baseline, it's going to be helpful to, like Patrick had indicated, to show trend lines that we'll be able to carry forward. So it would be my recommendation to include, some historical data within the new chart that you're going to put in the new draft, rather than just showing, the current data, whatever that is, 2022 or 23 or whatever it's going to be, and then moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jonathan, and I will include it that way. I may have it presented in multiple tables, so you can also look at it without that information and help make the table bigger. But yeah, it'll be there as well.
And one just last comment, and this is controversial, but Pima County has spent so much money on pavement pres in the last few years that we're actually seeing pretty substantial changes in our numbers in terms of the percentage of roads that are in good and good condition. Whereas regionally, we're probably still not going to show, we wouldn't show that much of a difference if you analyze the whole region right now. So there could be a benefit perhaps to breaking down that particular performance measure into unincorporated and incorporated areas, just show that it has been movement in the unincorporated areas, because I think this document and these performance measures are consumed by the public, and if there's a perception or even a reality that there's not much change or that we're going in the wrong direction, that doesn't help anybody. But in this case, there'd be a pretty positive bump on the Pima County roadway system that would be reflected if we called out that particular jurisdiction's measure separate from the whole region. So the city may not want to have that kind of nuanced information out there in the public, but there could be a benefit to having it there. So just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jonathan. And pavement is kind of one of those interesting little animals that we're going to have to address in the RMAP, because everybody's jurisdiction is investing differently in pavement, and our data collection is in a strange spot where we're just now working towards getting our region-wide pavement data collected. So everything's kind of falling in these strange places. But I think part of that discussion is simply the investment side. The county's pouring money into pavement, the city's pouring money into pavement, the jurisdictions are maintaining their investments in pavement and showing that it is either holding steady in certain areas. I'm looking at Jose as I say that, where their investments are kind of holding their threshold where they should be. But you're right, the county was kind of at a deficit, and now there's investment and there's change. And then to show that change, obviously, is going to be it's going to be kind of on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, but painting that whole picture of region-wide pavement investment and results, when the results are holding steady for one jurisdiction and maintaining is an ideal outcome for one jurisdiction, and then really moving the needle, sort of like what Prop 411 is doing, is a different scenario altogether. So it's a good point.
And that's what I was getting to earlier before.
Yeah, I can answer your
question. Data for payment preservation. It is subjective. I've seen other jurisdictions reported. Is it a PASER or a PCI? I mean, how are you reporting this?
There are two data sources, actually. The data source for the performance measure is a federal data set that comes from their annual roadway statistics report.
What they call an IRI.
That uses an IRI, and it's only a sampling of the network. ADOT collects that data and through a contractor, and that gets reported through the HPMS, the Highway Performance Management System. It's a computer program. So that database holds it. If the limitations of that, it's only the major road network, so it has a function class of 1 through 6, or local roads are not represented on that, and it's also a sample.
But we will be collecting at the region level with our own contract, and ideally we'll have that underway.
I'm still waiting for the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And that's the second data source. Up through 2020, City of Tucson had collected that.
And that's what I was driving at. Some of this statistics, some of this data, they represented, some of it's subjective. I know sometimes we got vision zero. It's great, but I've been to other conferences where it says it's really you gotta have to tell it whether, as long as you have vehicles in business, you're gonna have to tell it. It's nice to have zero. I mean, that's our goal, but is it achievable?
Yeah, there are a couple of communities that have achieved it. I can't spread them off the top of my head. Ben might know. Yeah, they've had it for more than a couple of years, right?
Hoboken, New Jersey.
There are a few, but yeah, you're right. But back to the pavement, our data is using IRI. It's not subjective. It is a calculated measurement using lasers and high-tech technology in it.
But IRI is definitely PCI.
Correct. Yeah. Locally, for asset management purposes, every jurisdiction has their own approach. For our performance measures program, the data that's expressed in the performance report for the Project Explorer, that's using the locally collected data. So you have access to all the roadway connect that was collected up through 2020. That's what's presented. Actually, I have to refer our staff to make sure we've had that data scrubbed and uploaded. If not, the current data is through 2018 for pavement.
David, sorry to interrupt. So Jonathan here, just kind of circling back to what Patrick had said, is how we're going to use this data to implement this data, and how we're going to maybe use it to help prioritize the cuts that we're going to need to make here. Kind of extending my comments on the pavement pres and how there's a difference by jurisdiction on the amount of roads that are in good condition. I think for a lot of these performance measures, there's going to be differences from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And I think rolling everything up into a regional percentage kind of does a disservice, or it doesn't help us kind of help understand where the needs are and where the failings are. And I think there'd be a benefit to having a breakdown with some of these performance measures by jurisdiction, because that's going to reveal where there are deficiencies, not just as a total number region wide, but in particular localities. And I think some of the equity concerns and the equity measures that we talked about maybe needing would reveal that maybe on a census tract or census area basis. But I think there could be some benefits to having some of these performance measures tracked by jurisdiction. When we've got crash data that shows that there's a higher proportion of crashes in one jurisdiction than another, I think that's really helpful information to have, and can help guide us in terms of what kind of investments we want to make. Same thing with just identifying certain facilities that may be in better condition in some jurisdictions than in other jurisdictions that don't exist. And I think having that kind of nuanced information can help provide some guidance as to where you want to invest region wide, so that we bring sort of all areas up to the same basis level, and not continue to put monies into areas that have better conditions and lower crash rates than other areas that have higher crash rates and less facilities for those who need them. You can roll up the numbers in a table and have that listed, but I think having parsing out that data by jurisdiction, I think, can be really helpful. And I'm sure you guys have that information to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I can respond to that, Jonathan. I think one of the things that we're trying to be sensitive to is the goal of the RMAP is not to point out the winners and the losers, right? So we as a region know where some of the hotbeds are. We know where some of the safety issues are, but we don't necessarily want to call out any one jurisdiction for their shortcomings or where the situations are. That being said, we also, we rely on you guys when you're making these project lists to know that, to say, okay, we know where our safety situations are. We know where where our investments need to be made to meet some of our individual jurisdiction situations. I mean, I think we saw that pretty clearly in the Move Tucson effort. So yeah, I agree with you. There is some benefit to that, but we also want to be sensitive to, you know, regionally calling out, you know, who might be falling behind. Is something we need to.
I think to maybe respond to Jonathan's earlier comment about, you know, pavement preservation, I think that same conversation could be brought out to looking at metrics about our sidewalk network. And I do think there is value in some of these performance metrics, maybe not all of them, to have that breakdown by jurisdiction, and really with the long-term goal that we want to raise the tides for our entire region. I don't want to get too in the weeds about, you know, pointing out where there might be extreme deficiencies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but I think it's data that does help inform our decision-making for that long-term planning process.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands. I don't believe this item specifically is on the TPC agenda for December. We will have a discussion on RMAP specifically on our standing agenda item where we can discuss like the outcomes of this meeting, but we won't go deeper into the conversation of performance measures, but we will talk about some of the outcomes of this. But I don't want to hijack too much more of the conversation because I know Hannah's over here itching to cut some projects off the list. Anyway, so unless anybody has anything else on performance measures that they really want to get out there before we move on, we'll go ahead and move on to the list. Okay, hearing none. Project list. Before I turn it over to Hannah completely, just kind of walk you through what we have available on the screen right now. We can also send any of this information to you via email. We have all of the different project lists, PDF available. I might, most of you know how to pull this out of the Project Explorer. Pull up. Okay, hold on 1 second. Hannah's gonna log in. So what we intend on doing today, obviously this is a big effort. We're gonna kind of look at every project list and ask you guys as the owners of these project lists to kind of give us an overview of what you're looking at and what you've submitted and why. We have a few questions specifically for different jurisdictions on their lists and some anomalies or you know, how to phrase it, some sort of just things that we caught as we were reviewing it that, you know, answers that we might have. But I think overall just sort of orientation on how we got to this point and trying to get some of these questions answered. Let me go into the Zoom and see if I can share. So I think this is really the first opportunity where everybody gets to look at each other's lists. So we, everyone's had access to the database, and I'm sure you're curious and you poked around and looked at each other's work, but it is our opportunity to sort of take a collective look at what we have. Hannah has passed out the list. I don't know if anyone wants us to email you these PDFs, I can go ahead and do that. I'd have Crystal send them out. But they are on the screen, so. Anyway, I guess just to start, we'll start with the county.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
This list of projects that I just got rid of, is this what's in the current RMAP? Or is that the new list? Because I know we added some new projects to the.
Yeah, so what's printed is just so it's in the current RMAP and the in-plan list, what's currently in the Explorer.
Or just what's currently in the Explorer?
Yeah, so some, from the RMAP updates, some projects may have been, removed or whatnot, but yeah, this is from the in-plan list in the RMAP
Yeah,
Explorer.
okay, just want to, thanks.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And if you are missing a project, let us know, obviously, but yeah, this is what we currently have based on the work that you guys done.
Really, because mine does is different than yours.
It is different. Well, and that is why we're here, for Jose to tell us that ours is
Mine is way
different. That's
different.
good. All right, let me pull it up.
I know I saved it, right?
Saved it.
The work that I did.
Okay, yeah, we know that. There were some that were kind of in the sandbox area that hadn't moved over, so we can, of course, save the closer with it anymore. So the first list I have up is Pima counties. I didn't know Jonathan or Peter if you wanted to or Peter. I'm sorry, Paul. Jonathan or Paul or Dana, if you guys wanted to kind of sort of walk us through your project list.
Okay, Paul, do you want me to take it or you want to go?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
All right. So, excuse me. Yeah, our list pretty much just reflects, obviously carryover from the last RMAP with a few new project additions. So if you're asking me to explain what was in the previous RMAP, I don't have prepared, I don't have anything prepared here, Jeanette. So if there's something specifically you want me to talk about, I can, but I don't want to waste time just explaining this list to anybody. So what are you looking for exactly?
Yeah, no, definitely not to run through the stuff that was already in there, but if there were big changes that you added, just anything that you think the group.
Yeah, the new stuff. I mean, and I'm not sure I'm seeing it reflected in this list. I'm kind of comparing it to my own list. So I think different from the last update, the county added in some sort of categorical elements that reflect, for example, pavement preservation, safety, all-weather access, intersection improvements, and some of the categories of projects that say the city had in their RMAP list last time that the county did not. And so that's kind of a change from our previous list, which was mostly, roadway widening and capacity projects. So I think down near the bottom, you'll see the system maintenance and modernization listed there. Transit may or may not have been in the last update from the county, but we are doing some bus shelter improvements, and so that's in there. But the important point is to make sure we had sort of categories of projects that were in the county that were in our own list and not simply just components of a region-wide category. So that's probably the biggest change, I think. Other than that, the projects are pretty self-explanatory, reflecting what have been in the books and what we've added since then, and don't really require a lot of discussion at this point.
Okay, thank you. I guess another point I wanted to make, not just towards the county specifically, but towards anybody, and I can just form it in a question to you, Jonathan, is are there any phasing opportunities in these projects where you anticipate one phase of the project happening in the first years, the early years of the RMAP, and so on and so forth down the time frame?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always potential for phasing, and I'd have to kind of look at it project by project, but I don't have any particular recommendations right now. But obviously all of our projects from a design and construction point of view get phased. So I think there's potential to do that if needed.
Yeah, I think that's one of our suggestions to all the jurisdictions too, is to look at some of the projects. We've seen some projects that are, really large in scope and distance. So, knowing how these things work, they're not all going to happen in the first phase of the RMAP or second. Ideally, what will be reflected in the Explorer is when they're going to start. But if there's an opportunity to take a project and either split it into two projects, knowing that the second part would happen later, that would be very beneficial, and also to our modeling efforts as well, to show the different phasing. So anyway, that's an ask on our end, to not just to you, Jonathan, but to all of the jurisdictions. I think that'll help us kind of frame it. We did see some of that. We typically see that in ADOT's project list. So they're a good example on that. It looks like Heidi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering, since you were saying create additional projects, are you asking that for, say, the design phase is one project and construction's another? And say if there's planning for environmental archaeology, is that with design, or is that its own planning phase?
It would be like more at a higher level, where you anticipate the starting efforts, the design, or any clearances that you have to do, and the completion of the project. Because I think those are 10-year timeframes. So we wouldn't want to see you break it down to that level of detail like you would in the tip.
Okay.
So current examples would be like the Grant Road project, Silver Bell, those that in RTA have phases, something similar to that is what you're looking for.
Sure, yeah, and we saw that in the ADOT project list, where the widening the 3 lanes happens early, and then the widening the 4 lanes happens later, or different segments of a project happen in different phases. So just give some thought to that, and if there's opportunities to break them down, that would be beneficial. Okay, moving on, we've got, let's see. We'll look at this. So Jose, you're saying that there's some things left off.
Well, this is my list here. That's what I worked on the RMAP.
Okay.
Then I look at that, wait a minute. The like, for example, that first one, Lambert Lane.
Yeah.
That's changed, the scope changed. That's it's part of the RTA next proposal.
Okay.
And then so did the cost estimate. Then you go down, let's see. Shannon Road, that also changed as well too. That's part of the RTA next proposal, as one of the projects that's being proposed.
Okay.
So I did the updates. I don't know why I didn't capture it.
Go back.
Those submitted as new projects.
Yeah.
Say, okay.
Yeah, because there were the old ones. So I put in a new project. We changed it with the different location description and different cost estimate. Also put in capacity, and also put the year.
So for the
to be
first one
early.
was, so for the first one was at Lambert Lane, Thornville, Rancho Sonora.
Yeah.
So to change to, okay. Yeah, so that is in the new list. It's just not on.
It's not on that list.
This
That's
list.
yours always asking.
Oh,
This
okay,
must be the
comes
old
on.
list. That's definitely on the old list. Because I also added some bridges.
So would we delete that?
Can we remove
one?
the?
I think we delete that one.
Okay.
And then if we go to the next one, Naranja, that's a low priority for the town. Same thing with Palisades. And Shannon, that's that was revised. Go down to the next one, Northern. That's medium, it's not high priority. And the one on Linda Vista, that's low priority as well. And then Rancho Vistos, we just took that off the list.
Okay, so that can be removed.
Yeah.
Oh, 111,
Yeah.
okay.
111. And then the 4.14, that is high priority for the town. Yeah, I'll give you my list so that we compare it. I know it's I just did it yesterday.
And so for the Shannon Road, so that number 6503 in the in plan, so that was revised to Shannon
Yeah.
Road, Club Drive to Tangerine Road.
That's it. Yep.
Okay, so we can delete the
Delete that one.
6503.
Added four projects to the list, mostly bridges.
Did they come over?
I think they can. And that you added those yesterday.
Well, the bridges added got a month ago or something like that.
Okay, yeah, they should have all come over. As long as there's nothing kind of in your save projects left hanging.
I just went in there
that-
yesterday to just make sure that the updated the year, whether it's early, middle, or late, and then make sure that it's capacitor or non-capacitor oriented.
Okay, perfect.
That's all I did.
So if Saurita is with us right now, anybody from Saurita on the line? No. All right, they get a pass.
Does that mean we get to cancel all their projects?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the recommendation, no, I think we might get a little pushback on that one. Oh goodness, but since you spoke up, Heidi, here's your list. So this is where we're at right now. Does this include the work that they did?
I don't think so.
Exported about noon yesterday. So
I don't think it has everything that we did. And I know, Dan, you had recently done some additional edits. Do you see your stuff on here?
I'm looking. To compare it to the list I had.
Yeah, or just pull it up and then we can.
Okay, I don't know if I'm able to share.
Yeah, let's see. One second, guys. I'm gonna.
Really hard to see it.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch screens in 1 second. I got the lag going on. Sorry.
I keep trying to scroll the screen up and I can't.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna share. Okay, so these should be the new projects. Take a look at these.
Yeah, I have that on my other screen. And
Yeah, it doesn't look like the TIs made it to the list.
Here's Marina Road TI.
Right, so on this here, on the dashboard they're in there, just not that other sheet you had.
So it looks like this changes that you made down made it in.
Yeah.
Here, okay. And then
The
we're there.
majority of our changes have been adding TIs since ADOT doesn't have any of the Marana TIs in their plan.
Yeah, on our list, on the ADOT list, it's the Marana TI is, I think it's currently in reserve, I think.
Okay, you go to. Other than adding the TIs, Heidi and Dan, were there any other major changes you wanted to point out for the group?
I'm not thinking so unless you have something, Dan. I don't think we had any major changes.
Do not.
It's hard to hear you, Dan.
I do not.
Okay. I think we're good.
Does anybody have any questions for Heidi? Dan? That about covers it. Go to the city. Did you want to share kind of the the evolution of the city's project? I think it was the one the most.
Yeah, so the in-plan stuff hasn't changed dramatically. The really what our a lot of our work has been in the Explorer for our new project list, primarily coming out of the Move Tucson priorities that we heard from Tucsonans and the priorities that we want to push forward through that effort. We did a little bit of data cleanup. We did some batch imports for those new projects. We did find a few discrepancies in cost estimates and have made those changes in the Explorer, as well as I think we found 2 duplicates. One was really a scope change, but those have been updated as far as the new projects go. With the in-plan projects that we have, really, I was looking for some direction for those projects that we can expect to either be completed or significantly delivered through 2025, assuming the plan is adopted in 2025. Does it make sense to remove those projects from the in-plan list? Specifically, those would be 22nd Street Bridge, Grant Road Phase 3-4, Downtown Links, and I think Silver Bell might be multi-jurisdictional. But
Yeah, so I mean, as a rule of thumb, we like to keep anything that's in the current tip in the RMAP. So I think most of those are in the current tip and are going to be in the tip that is ideally adopted in the spring. So I'm fingers crossed. So yeah, if there's a project that's in the tip, we're going to try to leave it in the RMAP just for.
No, I understand the rationale. I just think you know, that is a significant, not an insignificant sum of you know, dollars that we're talking about that could provide more opportunity for the entire region to move forward on.
Can you shoot us an email with those projects on it?
Sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, just send that to Hannah and we can further. Only other list, we didn't make a separate one for transit. Did we pull it out? No, I can pull it up on here. So okay, so we have transit. So we've been working with Suntran and with our RTA transit team to make some adjustments in transit. We did notice some duplications. And so, you know, I think Hannah, you might have removed some or brought them to the attention of transit. So we might see some in there, but Rhett, did you want to discuss? I know we've been working with Davita and she's not here today, but I didn't know if you had any comments that you wanted to make in regard to the transit list.
I think what you've got here is a fairly accurate reflection of what we've got going. We obviously adjusted some numbers on Monday, which I believe Patrick shared with you guys. We do have, as some of you may know, we are working on a high capacity transit system that is in project development right now. That's associated with the North Bay Sewer project that we're working on. It is a BRT project, and we are in project development right now. We would be submitting a capital investment grant in the spring, potentially, based on the preliminary work we're doing right now. So I don't know. Obviously, it's not a current project, but it's something we want to keep on our radars.
Plan project list. One of the interesting things that Hannah and I found that will definitely want some clarification from you and City of Tucson and maybe Patrick is that 6th Avenue. We're showing both 6th Avenue streetcar and high capacity transit or BRT. So we didn't know if there was a preference for one or the other, or if it was the intention to have both.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Brett, do you want to speak to this?
No, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, the intention behind having really what we're looking at were for BRT options and for streetcar options on that project list, which in an ideal world we could chase one or the other option, whichever makes the most sense on that corridor. But because we're not at a place right now where we've done a fair amount of public outreach on Tucson North Bay Sewer as an entire corridor, our immediate needs are looking to that north section, and the south section along 6th Avenue will need more planning efforts and more public outreach before we can come to a conclusion whether streetcar or BRT makes more sense for that corridor, not just from the transportation perspective, but also from the land use side of things. So that's the reason why they might look like, duplicate projects, but in reality, they are obviously very different projects when it comes to delivery. So we just wanted to leave those options open.
So would it be the city's intent to put the streetcar project in the reserve then if you're chasing the BRT?
So for the north section, which would be from Tohono Tadai to Ronstadt, we're chasing BRT through an Oracle or Stone route, but we're not so sure on the south side. So I don't know that I have any solid answers for you. We didn't want to push a project off the list or immediately put it into reserve until we had better information.
Okay. I guess that would be our same question with the other $4 billion worth of streetcar projects that are on the in-plan list. If the idea is to build and construct all of those lines by 2055, have to sort of flesh out what should stay on the in-plan list as a pursuit versus on the reserve as a
Yeah, I think it just might be an extended conversation.
Yeah.
I've definitely been immersed in this for just a short time, so leaning on my other colleagues to more accurately spell out where we're at in terms of planning if we want on reserve or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
These are expensive projects, as noted. I think we've got basically 30 years here, and I think we want to leave them in simply because once we've had enough time to really truly evaluate, especially that south portion of the project, to Ben's point, we don't know if it's going to be streetcar or BRT. We'll have a little bit more experience here coming up in the spring when we've fully vetted the BRT plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's very understandable. I think we're, and Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at a fiscal constraint in the $16 billion range. So, keeping that in mind, especially for those who are new to this process, is that our in-plan project list has to be fiscally constrained. So we can't plan for more than that $16 billion worth of projects. So with that being said, you know, we've got to be really strategic about what we leave in plan and what we put on the reserve. And that's not to say, of course, that those changes can't be made and that they won't be further refined in the next go round. But
there's a way, a mechanism to bring projects that are in reserve back into the RMAP if things do change in a couple of years from now. This is a long range plan.
Right.
So you're not ready in the next 5 years, put in reserve, and then, or if you're ready in the next 2 years, you can bring them back from an amendment.
Yeah.
Not totally off the map, it's just reserve. Know exactly what's gonna happen, you can always.
Absolutely. One, did we have the 8-out list? Yeah. The 8-out list, let me pull it up. Preemptively opened theirs. Mark, did you want to speak a little bit to the 8-out project list?
Sure. The updates that they made were just to make sure that it was consistent with the design concept reports that we've completed on the state system and the implementation plans that were created as part of those DCRs. So just phase those out. You know, the kind of the focus is the priority is shifting from the I-10 west of Tucson, where those improvements are pretty much getting completed, and shifting focus to I-10 east of Tucson, and modernizing the I-10 east of Tucson, making sure that all those phases are consistent with that DCR that was completed in the implementation plan. So as they're focused on updated the costs, that's pretty much just combining. We combined Country Club Keno to match what's in the current tip, I think that's it. The only question I had was, as far as duplicate, I noticed on Marana's list they included the Marana TI and the Cataro TI, and then they're also on the ADOT list as well. So I just wanted to point that out. I didn't know if that was an issue or not, but they're on both lists. So
okay, they will be moved. We'll probably put it as a probably even on the ADOT list.
So yeah, and those are carryover. Those were already in there. It was just how they were listed as in plan or reserve. So
okay.
Other than that, I think that's it. Again, just so it's consistent and it follows the design concept report implementation plan and any phasing that was identified for the project. So
Was another project we had a question about. Yeah.
So, and then also I didn't mention, I-19, the improvements on I-19 as well. So that's also, those were also made sure that was current. So
We also are showing this 1823. This is the city of Tucson, Oracle Road, River to Speedway, upgrade traffic signals. Was this a partnership project between the two of you, or?
Which project is that?
It's showing up here. It's 18.23. It's City of Tucson sponsored project. Here, let me share this screen. I want one.
Okay.
There it is. This is the top one right there. New project.
To Speedway Boulevard upgrade traffic. I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any information on that.
This is a signal, traffic signal, import from our Move Tucson effort. We had a long list of, traffic safety or traffic signal improvements that we wanted to make. This section of Oracle being one of them. But it was something that was just, highlighted through our process. Wasn't necessarily, I don't know what conversations were had at the multi-jurisdictional level.
Yeah, I mean, I only asked because it's on the ADOT right away.
Right. Yeah.
We'll have to coordinate a little.
Did Tucson maintain those traffic signals? They do?
Okay, we had another one real quick that we wanted to verify. This is for Tangerine Road, I-10 to Dove Mountain. Is this the correct cost estimate? Or is that including the TI? Heidi, Dan, can you see the screen?
Dan, you have the latest number. Do you want to chime in?
I don't have that information.
Okay, yeah, if you guys could just take a look at that project and verify that cost estimate and let us know if that includes the TI or not. That would be helpful. I think we've got the answers to all the questions we had specifically to the different listed. There were a few just sort of general asks, and I know some of these have been Hannah's put out there to the group, and some of you have been out there doing it. Is just a couple asks. One, to get into the projects and look at the term, or let's see, I'll just show you on this one. So to get in here and re-examine your time frame. So right here, you'll see the drop down where you can put your time frame here. I'll just open this one. Looks like. So we have our early, middle, and late time frames that have been adjusted, to show the dates that we're looking at. So really go back into your list, look at your time frame, and make sure that these are accurate and that they're filled in. The other is the system. So make sure these are filled in. I believe it will force you to fill this in, but just make sure that they're correct. This financial plan system, we'll be going in and verifying these, but if you're seeing any discrepancies between the selections for these and how you're looking at your projects, definitely let us know and get in there and just give it a once over. But really this time frame one is the one that we're really focused on. Also the priority. So low, medium, and high priority as well. I know some folks have gone in there and made those changes, but if you have not, please do so. That'd be very helpful to us. Anna, did you have any other?
Jeanette?
Yeah. Oh, who was
I'm
that?
sorry, this is Mark. So just on that tangerine, I was just looking at ADOT list. So I don't have the tangerine TI on the ADOT list. And I think the scope was very similar to the Cortaro. So, and the
Right,
Cortaro,
it's just
yeah.
basically doing the abutment lanes when we're talking
Mhm.
about the Tangerine TI for right now.
Okay,
It's not a full interchange at this point, per
at this
se.
point. Okay.
But we would want the full TI in the RMAP. If it holds as an RTA next project, it'll definitely stay in.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. That's my question was, next question was, that's an RTA next consideration, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So that's a good point is ideally we'll have that list next week. I'm being optimistic. But we'll definitely have that, here in the next coming months, and that will be reflected. So any of those projects, if they are on the named list, they'll stay in the RMAP for sure.
Is that
But
is
I
that
think
something?
this one here is only including the abutment lanes. This one wouldn't have the full TI cost in with this. Are you asking me to put the full TI in with this? Because this project as it is with the widening from I-10 to Dove Mountain is only including the abutment lanes at this time.
Okay, so that's in the 108, that's all that's included there.
I think so. I'm verifying
Yeah.
that, but that's the intent is only to have abutment lanes at this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me know if you want me to add the Tangerine I-10 Tangerine TI to the ADOT list.
I think we have to, since the TIs from what Jeanette was saying is going on your list, not ours.
Yeah. So, and it's not a project that I can pull from RTA next list because it's not coming up under the ADOT jurisdiction, correct? It's not in there at all.
Okay, we can slide it. We can slide it over. We'll see.
And if it's the same scope, I mean, it's right at 200 million for the TI. I think it's following the same scope. So.
Yeah, I think they're all pretty close.
Yep.
Jonathan, looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, Jeanette, just confirming. So do we have the ability to go in and change whether or not a project is in reserve or in plan at this point?
I believe so.
Because I didn't, yeah, I it's been a few weeks or months since I input, so I forget.
Yeah, and we've been, I think we've been leaving most of the features open at the moment, but.
Okay. Because I've noticed since in today's discussion, looking at our list again, that we've got to make some changes. So I'm gonna be doing that if that's possible.
Scroll. Jonathan, we'll get in there and make sure you're able to make that change.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome, Natalie. I didn't see that you had joined us.
Yeah, I joined an hour late, so I had another meeting. I had a question about, you didn't pull up the multi-sponsor RMAP list. So this is the first time I've gone through this process. I'm just wondering about the air monitoring data collection region-wide expand air quality monitoring project. I don't know. I don't understand why that would be included in that list.
Yeah, we have a list of programs that we're going to be looking at because they're, don't want to call them legacy projects, but they, I think that one was added. That was added in 1998. So there's definitely some old stuff in here that will be clearing out, and we'll be bringing some of those recommendations to you. But yeah, certainly if anybody on this call wants to make changes to those as well, Let us know for sure.
Okay, yeah, because that funding is completely independent of any transportation funding.
Yeah, absolutely. On the other list that we're not going to really go through today is the airport authority list, so, and the aviation list. So Miranda also has some aviation projects. Those do not come out of that 16 billion constrained number. So we will treat those differently. They do remain in the long range plan, but for the purposes of getting to our fiscal constraint, they're not really the conversation. All right, I don't see any other hands up. Does anybody have any other questions at this point? We anticipate at December TPC, we'll have a sort of a recap of what we've discussed here, and I'm sure we'll have made some of these changes that we've heard today, and we'll follow up with you all as we keep digging and find some stuff. So certainly let us know. Anything else for the good of the order? Right.
What's the next step? Do we whittle down the projects or what do we do?
Yes, yes, that's exactly what we're gonna do. Oh, Jose, yeah, we're gonna have to whittle down. I think based on these changes, we're gonna see where we land, and then kind of go from there and see how big that gap is. It's looking like about a $10 billion gap, maybe more depending on so
That'll be in another RMAP meeting
that'll be another meeting
next year.
Jose will be available next year for the meeting. All right, thank you everyone. With that, it's time to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
One.